Hey folks, welcome back to my ongoing series on the kind of deeper underpinnings of why our society is so dysfunctional and what the hell is going on in our world right now. In this video, I'm about to say something really ugly and really challenging, but that doesn't make it any less true. And as a coach, as someone who helps people put themselves back together and reorganize and heal and awaken, this is, I think, all too self-evident in my world. Okay, so here's the ugly thing I want to share with you. From my perspective, we have a real epidemic out there of low levels of personal development, of low levels of emotional development, psychological development, of models of understanding of life and self and world and other. And this epidemic of normalizing that, accepting that, allowing people to be low level and dysfunctional, allowing ourselves to be low level and dysfunctional is a major piece of why our society is the way it is right now. Now, I know that sounds judgmental. I know that sounds prescriptive. And I'm sensitive to that. I don't want to be too heavy-handed here, but I also need to just tell the truth as I see it. And this is the truth as I see it. There just is a very low level of functioning. The way I describe it to my clients a lot, and to make it a little more humorous here, is that generally speaking, what I observe is that in life around us, the level of maturity you need, most people mature to somewhere around high school level of development maximum. And then from there, development is optional. Okay, so you have all kinds of adults out there in the world who have only matured, let's say, to about a high school level of consciousness. And from there, they pivot to managing their appearance and projecting a look that's acceptable or attractive or appropriate or seems on par with what it is they want to convey about themselves in life. So they move to managing perception rather than truly working at personal growth. Now, some of the examples of what I mean in terms of low levels of personal development, low levels of emotional development, first of all, right? For example, if you think revenge as a relational model is healthy or good, being petty, being shame-based and judgment-based, being manipulative, lying, cheating, deceiving yourself. We see what else? These kinds of things. These are super common. These are in most people. And they're not bad per se. They're not wrong per se. They're just young. They're just immature. They're just early models that you've never grown up from and grown past. And it's uncanny how many people I've seen, continue to live from these places in themselves and never self-reflect. Another example would be low cognitive development. In other words, the ideas, the impressions, the understandings, the learnings, the way you think, the processes you use to make sense of things. One of my friends had a phrase I love, learning how to learn. You've never learned how to learn. You just kind of let your brain autopilot spit out some maybe not great stuff. And then you roll with that. You run with that. You assume that's true. You never investigate it. You never explore it. Same thing. So then you encounter someone who seems smarter than you in the world, who seems to know more than you, who seems to have a better idea or some grander theory than anything you've ever thought about. And because you've never learned to, think properly, to explore ideas, to question things, to challenge things, to make good sense of things, to test ideas, because you never learned how to do that, these bigger things that sound very official and impressive slide right in. Another obvious example here is with cognition, learning how to separate things you're actively thinking versus autopilot thoughts, learning how to separate out emotional logic from actual logic. These would all be great examples of low levels of cognitive development. And when you have a society full of people who are underdeveloped emotionally and cognitively, let alone spiritually, right? What is that? What does that look like? Low levels of spiritual development, selfishness, impulsivity, over-reliance on materialism for satisfaction, over-consumptive consumer culture, ends justifies the means. When you assume that these things are going to make you happy, you're setting yourself up, let alone, the bigger picture of how you show up spiritually in life. You're setting yourself up for a deep, I want to say insanity, in the sense that, like, when your model of how to be happy isn't working, you kind of loop on it and it kind of drives you crazy. You start doubling down and tripling down and going harder, on a flawed premise. And that flawed premise is never going to deliver you the thing you think that you're seeking. So we have a society filled with people like this, with low levels of, again, emotional, cognitive, spiritual development, who are more interested in projecting an image than in actually growing, who are more interested in being right initially than learning. And because of this sense that gets made collectively, the actions that make sense, the solutions that resonate, the entire approach to how we engage the world and how we shape the world and, how we understand the world, how we relate to the world, all of it gets distorted. It all gets warped through this funky, underdeveloped lens. And so a huge part of the reason we're at where we're at collectively in society, and there are other reasons, this is not it, but this ongoing, and it is a culture, because we've had culture in the past that valued education, that valued maturity, that valued a higher standard than what we're currently setting for ourselves. When the culture is dysfunctional, when the culture accepts these low levels of personal development, what we get is just messier and messier and more charged and more ugly and more distorted. Because let's take someone kind of like at a low mid-level of development. And, by the way, side note, I'm not saying I'm super highly developed. No. That shit goes super far. I'm developed enough to be able to help other people. But let's just imagine for a moment, someone out there is at kind of a normie, standard adult level of development. They are kind of what I would call low mid. They have flaws in their thinking, distortions in how they relate to themselves and the world. They maybe have real distortions in their, emotional development that have gone unexamined and unhealed. A person like that, maybe it doesn't seem like such a big deal that they're not all that well cultivated on one level. But when you start to look at the way that they justify their behaviors and that people who are even less developed than them look at that and go, oh, that's the way. And then, you start to look down the line at people who are really dysfunctional and underdeveloped. You start to see that the lower the overall average standard, the more the low end of things gets really out of hand. And that's where we get a lot of the, toxic, unhealthy, warped, unhinged behavior we're seeing in our society right now. A lot of that, comes from moral systems that are built on pain, right? Relational maps that are built on old wounds that never got cleaned up. that are based on, poor thinking, or even more so the unwillingness to think for oneself, et cetera, et cetera. I could rant on this. I know I'm kind of rambling here, so I'm going to kind of close out the video here. But in summary, part of the reason we're in the shit show we're in right now is because of a low level of personal development at scale, from my perspective. What do you think? Does this make sense? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'd love to know what your perspective is. Do you feel like I'm being unfair, harsh? I mean, I know it's kind of a judgy way of framing things, but it's also like, I don't know how else to say it in a way that's any kinder. Let me know what you think. I'd really love to know. Leave a comment down below. And if you watch the video this far, big love to you. Deep appreciation for you. I'll see you in the next one.